Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, beautiful night for a stroll, hey Tim? Kind of night when nothing could possibly go wrong.
I don't know. I wonder if that orange orb that's been following us would agree with you.
Oh, holy crap. Are we about to be abducted again? I'm getting tired of all these probes.
I don't know. It's so small, just teeny tiny. I think maybe it's a drone. Maybe it's remotely operated or run by artificial intelligence.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's a small probe for once. I'm not sure. I sense a consciousness about it. We better get back to the studio and get out of here. I mean, geez, you got to watch out for these orbs. You don't know whether they're friendly or hostile or what it is that they have in mind.
Well, I hope we don't experience missing time because we have our show to do right now.
Yeah, I bet our guest tonight would have some good advice for us about the weird light following us. Reagan Lee, she's an expert on orange probes and orbs. So let's get back to the studio before this damn thing nails us.
Get out of my way! Let's go!
Oh, hurry up again! Hurry up! We're always running. I'm exhausted.
We made it.
Oh, boy, I tell you that was a close call. But we're back now on safe, solid ground. But I'm sure that we're soon to be going back into orbit.
Ow! Ugh. Where's the rim shot when you need it? All right. Well, it's great to be back at KCOR, Tim.
Well, you were out of town. You were a long way away. Somebody said, "Where was Tim Schwartz last week?" I said, "Minding his own business for a change." No, where were you? You were gone. You were gone far away. I mean, you were
completely.
You weren't in town.
Completely out of the country, Tim.
I hear you went to Cuba or something.
No, not Cuba. We went to Grand Cayman, which is south of Cuba, like
begins with a C.
That's right.
Begins with a C. That's close. Yeah.
West of Jamaica, south of Cuba.
And you had fun, I take it.
Oh, it was so nice. It's just the weather was just so beautiful the entire time we were there, and as soon as we got back home, it's been raining every day since. So I'm ready to go back. We'll start doing our show from Grand Cayman, Tim.
Well, boy, oh boy, and where do I have to sit? I got to sit here in Manhattan with all this skyscrapers going up and bustling in the streets and noise and I got a headache from the dust. But what the hell? We got an exciting guest on tonight, and we're going to probe these orange orbs and find out what the heck is going on here. Because I've seen them floating across my room, and I know that they're popping up all over the place. Our friend there in Sedona, Tom Dongo, has a whole photo album full of photographs of orbs that have appeared over the Bradshaw Ranch. I mean, it's just, and people are taking videos of these things, and they're appearing inside houses and outside houses and at treetop level and below. So let's get on with the show, Tim. Tell our listeners.
Tell
our listeners who we're having on. Yeah.
Yeah, tonight we have Reagan Lee. Now, Reagan has been writing and reporting on UFOs and paranormal topics for a number of years, and she's written and self-published a book on the Oregon Bigfoot legend, and has consulted with the media and other researchers on ghost hauntings, UFOs, all the things that we love to talk about on Exploring the Bizarre. Now, her educational background includes degrees and experiences in language arts, ethnic and folklore studies, and early education. Now, as a graduate student, she worked in the folklore archives and co-taught a women in folklore course. Reagan's passion lies in art and the paranormal, including UFOs. Her philosophy at this stage in her journey with regards to UFOs combines both theories of Zecharia Sitchin and other ancient astronaut schools, as well as the existence of another reality, like the Goblin universe, where beings are often mistaken for UFOs and maybe even ghosts. Now, Reagan has also contributed to such books as, Up Rainbow Hill, Alien Strongholds on Earth. We know that
Good
one.
book. Good book.
Yeah,
Good book.
and another one called A Bigfoot from Outer Space. Love that name. And UFO Mary. So let's bring in Reagan Lee on Exploring the Bizarre.
Good.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Good evening, Reagan. How are you out there in Oregon? You're in Oregon, right?
Yes, I'm in Oregon, Western Oregon. And how are you, Tim and Tim?
Well, we're hanging. We're hanging. Orbs fascinate me. Um, Everybody seems to be seeing them, and a lot of people seem to be photographing them or claim that they're photographing them. But a lot of them, I'm not so sure whether they're orange orbs or whether they're dust on the lens or even raindrops. Now, when was your first experience with an orb? I understand that it had something to do with an abduction and missing time. It wasn't just a sighting of some little device that floated by. It was much more evidential and much more um, uh, strange and unusual than that. Correct?
Correct. And that's what I find both fascinating and frustrating, because at the time I saw the orb, which was 35 years ago maybe, it was very large. I want to make the distinction between like spirit kind of orbs, which are smaller and they're a little more, what's the word I want? Ephemeral maybe. And this was like some kind of craft or machine or something. It was not just some little light in the sky. It was a thing, and it was very large. And so at the time, I had never heard of a UFO looking like that, and I went and I tried to do all the research I could at the time, what was available. And, of course, this was before the Internet and everything. And I couldn't find anything about what I saw. And then years later, reports of primarily orange, but now they're all different colors, orbs were showing up. But even now, when I look at videos that people have taken of orbs, they're much smaller, they're much further out and up in the sky than what I saw. So I don't know if they're of the same thing or not, or something different, if they're related. I don't know what the connection is. But so I find it fascinating that now there have been books written about orange orbs and people are seeing them everywhere and videotaping them. But at the time when I saw mine, I couldn't find anything.
And can you give us was it a solid object or a flat object? Did it seem to have a dimension to it?
It seemed like a big basketball size or beach ball, more like a beach ball. It's pretty big and very, very close. And in fact, at one point it was right across the street, the road rather, from us. And it was hard to tell. It seemed like a sphere, that was lit from within. You could see something.
Did it make any sound or give off any
Not
heat?
that I could hear, but I was on a motorcycle at the time, so if it did make a sound, I did not hear it.
Mm-hmm. And did it stay in one position or did it move around?
No.
Yeah.
It moved around. I had caught sight of it kind of out of the corner of my eye, and it was stationary in the sky when I first saw it. And
how low down was this now?
It wasn't. It's hard to say. It was. At first, it was up above a hill. Mm-hmm. About a mile up the road, there was a little hill, and so that's where it seemed to be. And it's pretty large. And as soon as I made note of it in my mind, I saw it and I thought, "What the heck is that?" It zoomed out towards me, like it came right at me, and then followed us as we traveled along the road. And then as we turned the corner to our house, it stopped at a house across catty corner from ours, stopped for just a second, and then dropped down into the backyard of this house.
Ooh. It's pretty spooky. I mean, were you frightened by this?
No. I was intrigued, highly intrigued, but the fear did come in later.
Now, had you begun your descent into ufology at that point?
Not too much, although I was interested. I had always been interested, ever since I was a kid, in this kind of stuff. And I didn't know a lot, but anytime the subject would come up, I was wanting to know. And when I was 15, I read Donegan's, Chariot of the Gods, Neighbor loaned it to me. I mean, I read that thing in 2 minutes. It's like, oh my God, I don't believe this. So, but I didn't actively seek it out, although I was always open to it, and I had lots of experiences as a kid. And my mother saw a UFO when I was about 10, and she called us all out to see it, but nobody would even come out. And I came out. She's on the porch, and I came out though, and it was gone. And she was so disappointed that she said, "I was there. I swear to you, it was there." And I said to her, she told me, this is what I said, I don't remember saying this. She said, "Do you remember what you said to me?" And I said, "No." She said, "Don't worry, Mom, they'll come back. They always come back."
And you were right.
Yeah. So the orange orb, I wasn't afraid. I was very hyper. I was my adrenaline was going. I was super hyper, and I remember running to the phone, who do I call? I got to call the police or the airport or something. Maybe what the hell, what? And I said, who am I going to call this late at night? It wasn't super late, but, and then I went to the front door to go outside because I saw it drop down in the person's backyard. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go out and look for it. And I actually put my hand on the door, and then I thought, no, I'm not going out there. And I did it. I did not leave the house. And
now,
my husband
did you have?
Yeah.
No. I was just going to say, did you have missing time involved with this?
Yes, we found out later. We were coming back from a town not very far away, from Cottage Grove. It would, at most, it would take us on a motorcycle, especially the way my husband drove. It would take us, not more than half an hour, probably half an hour to get back. And it was 3 hours. We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened during that time.
And you had no bruises on your body or no alien scratch marks or anything along that? No,
none of that stuff. But that's when the dreams started. These horrible, paralyzing, awful dreams of being outside on my porch and being paralyzed in a beam of light and just furious and scared all at once because I knew my husband was there too, but they, whoever they are or were, had taken him and were keeping us separated. And I was just aware of a large, round craft, I don't know, thing above me. But that's all I know. That's all I can remember. I never saw an entity of any kind or have any memories other than that. But the dreams went on were so horrible and intense that I ended up seeing a therapist who, of course, thought I was just silly. But
well, silly better than crazy.
yeah, maybe she's being polite. I don't know. But I remember feeling very humiliated after seeing her. Yeah.
Well, obviously you think that these objects, these orbs, are intelligent, even though you didn't see any sort of altered terrestrial with it. Apparently these things, I mean, we just mentioned briefly about the Bradshaw Ranch there in Sedona, where they started out with mysterious lights on Linda Bradshaw's property, and then they started being seen and photographed all over town. Like I say, Tom Dongo showed me a whole scrapbook of these. Some of them are in single orbs. A lot of them are orange, but some of them aren't. And it got to the point where it developed where strange beings. I hate to call them creatures. That's not very politically correct. But beings unknown to us here on Earth were being seen. One of them even walked across the main street of town, I understand. And then he's got this blue man that showed up on one of the photographs, and all sorts of weird things going on there in the canyon. My friend Charlotte and I have gone out there on several occasions to visit with Tom and had some weird experiences ourselves. And then, of course, Ted Phillips talks about these objects. What town is that, Tim? Do you remember where the objects appear that Ted Phillips is photographed and all?
Oh,
yeah.
I have no idea.
You know which ones.
Yeah, I know which ones you're talking about, but
Marley.
Oh,
Woods.
Marley Woods. Well, that's in
Woods.
Missouri. I'm not sure
Missouri,
where. Yeah, I'm not sure what town it's close to.
Yeah, but they started out as small orbs on the outside, and then they grew in size, and then suddenly they were appearing inside people's homes. But you've never seen one. Have you had additional sightings of an orb beside that original one, and have they ever come into your house?
You know, I had a weird experience once. I don't even know what to think of it. I never put it together before with orbs, but I woke up, we were in bed, it was morning, I woke up, and my husband was sitting up in bed with his back to me, and I saw a white orb floating around all up and down his back, and he was just sitting there. He wasn't saying anything. And I'm thinking, white? And I even called him, and he didn't really respond. And then this orb went all over the room, but it wasn't like someone was shining a light or anything. This was its own thing. And I thought, this is really weird. And I even, I finally touched him. I said, Jim, what? And he went, huh? And then I went back to sleep. And then I woke up again, and I turn and I see him sitting on the side of the bed, and the orb it's just like a repeat, like Groundhog Day. It was very weird. It freaked me out, and he has no memory of this. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I don't know what that was about. That was after the orange orb sighting. In fact, we were living in a different place. So I don't know if there's any connection with that or what, but
the late Paul Benowitz reported very similar situations where at the really the height of all the activity that was going on around him, and other people outside of his family saw this as well. They would see these, I think they were described as like white orbs floating around his house, and he thought that they were some kind of like, government spy devices or something. But I guess his wife accidentally brushed up against one time, and it gave her an electric shock. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of activity, was happening after I saw the orange orb, like that white orb experience. A weird experience I had while meditating, and I've talked about this before, where I saw, I guess you could call them grays. They were trying to come into my room, but because I was meditating and I was using crystals and things, that was keeping them out, and they were pissed off. They did not like that, but they couldn't get past this little like light barrier I had. I was having a lot of psychic or precognitive episodes where I would just see something happen, and a little bit later it would happen. And I can't help but think there's a connection there with that. Those things have really ceased, and I'm not sure why. And I've even written about this online. I wonder if age has something to do with it, and if being female has something to do with it, and being postmenopausal has something to do with it. I don't know, but there might be something there about that.
Well, I don't. It seems that the people that are taking the photographs and having these experiences, gender-wise, it seems to be split 50-50, although I don't know as if anybody has done a survey on this. But anyway, when we come back from our commercial break here, I want to have Tim ask you about Dana Howard, who you've written about, and the strange things that go on in the desert. You've done some very remarkable, very poetic chapters in our books related to her and some of these mysterious events in the desert. And it also, I think, to some degree, the apparition of Diana from Venus, seems like the part of the Marian phenomena, which you are also have investigated. And so I think that that's an avenue that we will want to explore.
On Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned for more.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight, our guest is Reagan Lee. And Reagan, there was something that you said in the first part of this program that I found interesting. We were talking about orbs, orange orbs, white orbs, whatever. And you had said that there was a time when you'd be meditating and you could actually see these grays trying to approach you, but they were unable. And it makes me wonder whether or not these things, whatever they are, extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, interdimensional beings, whatever, if these orbs, these balls of energy, may not be their true form, and that at times they present to us a form like the gray aliens, or the tall Aryan types, as a way for us to have something to perceive, so to speak. But their true form is a ball of energy.
it's funny you mention that because I've been thinking about this lately, and some people suggest these orbs are plasma. Now, a skeptic would say, well, that's all it is, plasma, case solved. But some people, some researchers have gone with that and said, just because it may be a type of plasma doesn't negate the fact it could be intelligent, and there's a lot more to it than we think. So I'm pursuing that idea, and I think there might be something to that. This orb I saw very well could have been plasma, although it seemed to move with such intent and focus, not just like radically moving around, randomly moving around, rather. So, it could be a combination of these things. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, interdimensional, all these things at the same time. And I think sometimes we have a hard time putting our heads around that. Like, what do you mean? It's much easier to say it's this one thing. Now we can move on.
Yeah. Well, I think
like these entities I saw, they were really there, but on a different level. If someone had walked in the room, they wouldn't have seen anything except me sitting there. But I don't think they would have seen anything. But they were there nonetheless. Their energy was there. They were presenting themselves to me on a, the astral plane or whatever you want to call it, some other level.
I remember somebody who studied almost entirely in their career ghosts and hauntings and spiritual beings, that sort of thing, and they had actually had been in communication with a lady who was haunting a house, an older lady, and I guess that through this mental communication, he had asked her at one point if because anytime anybody would see her when she was haunting, she looked like she did, shortly before, sometimes shortly before she died, and other times when she was kind of more in the prime of her life, like her late 20s, early 30s, that sort of thing. And I guess this spirit had told him that her actual form was more along the lines of a ball of energy or a ball of light. Yeah, so I just always found that fascinating, and especially when people such as yourself have these experiences, with these orbs. And again, we should stress as these are different than these little dots that people take pictures of a lot of times, which are probably just digital artifacts. These are things that can be ranged from the size of, say, like a ping pong ball to, like you said, like the size of a basketball, sometimes even larger.
Mm-hmm. One time I was investigating a haunted house, and there was a ton of activity in this house. And I took a lot of photographs. Nothing ever appeared. But above the head of one of the residents of the house, there was a white, a small white orb, translucent. And I found it interesting that that's the only time an orb has appeared in one of my pictures. Now, it very well could have been dust on the lens, sure. But I also think of the context of that photograph. This particular person was one of the residents that had a lot of interaction with the paranormal activity going on there. And I just found it interesting the orb showed up at that time and that place. It's impossible to say if it was truly a spirit orb or just, dust. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a photograph I look at every now and then and go,
Things that make you go,
Things that make you go, Yeah.
All right. Now, Mr. Beckley definitely wanted us to bring up your interest in deserts and the hollow earth and Dana Howard, and perhaps some of our listeners may not be aware of who Dana Howard was. And perhaps you could give us a brief explanation on who we're talking about.
Yeah, Dana Howard was a woman, and she wrote a few books, Up Rainbow Hill, and I forget the titles of the others. And she, actually one of her first experiences
over the threshold was one.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you very kindly sent me a copy. Yes.
Well, yes, indeed.
Yeah. When she's very young, I think she was in her teens. She might have been younger. I think she was even younger. And this is back. It must have been in the maybe 30s, where she was in the woods and she saw an apparition come to her. Very much like a Marian apparition, except she doesn't describe it that way at all. And the apparition or entity, whatever you want to call it, spoke to her and said she'll return. And then later, Dana had other encounters and sightings of this apparition that said she was Diane from Venus. And she was actually in a church once, and this entity appeared, and other people saw it as well as a light, just like an apparition, like a light. Dana saw more of a human figure, but others did say that they saw an apparition appear. And
that church still exists. I looked it up on the on the internet.
Yeah.
It's a small little
Church
place. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, it's a small, really small church. It's got to be like one of the smallest churches in the United
like
States
a house.
or something.
Yeah. And so she had these. She went out to the desert. She found a lot of peace in the desert. A lot of she did not feel lonely there at all. She felt very much at peace, and she had telepathic communications with this being or spirit, whatever you want to call it, and she became, like, for lack of a better term, a UFO contactee. There are a lot of female contactees in the 50s, but we're beginning, we hear about them more and more, but and so a very interesting woman, I thought, and she just continued to have these experiences with this entity, Diane she said she was Diana from Venus. I find it interesting that like a lot of the contactees is being said she was from Venus. A lot of them said they were from Venus. Some said they were from Jupiter or Mars, but mostly Venus, which is the planet symbolizing love, and with the female. So I wonder if that has something to do with it. But
and her
she was definitely
her stories
into something.
Yeah, yeah, and her stories were among the most poetic, I think, written among the contactees. We're in touch with her niece, and according to her, her niece said that people think of her. Well, she's the only one in the family who liked her auntie that well. Didn't think that she was a little whack-a-ding hoy, as Long John used to say there.
Yeah.
But apparently she had a lot of contacts in Hollywood as well. She was trying to get her experiences made into a movie and all, but it didn't quite work out. I suppose we could make it into an action hero, a superhero these days or something. I don't know this. what everybody seems to want to watch. I'm not exactly sure why, but we could add her to the list of the Avengers or something.
Well, what is it though about deserts and I suppose wild places that seem to attract these kinds of experiences, or maybe they tend to attract the type of people who would be prone to having these experiences?
Right. I think it's both. That the connection is made, the bond is there. Deserts are open. They're not many people want to go, so they're places where you could find a lot of solitude and peace. No doubt the geology of the place, I'm sure, has a lot to do with attracting these things. Maybe they're attracted to geologic elements in the desert. And also, even though it's out in the open, it's very easy to not be seen because how many people are out there?
Mm-hmm.
So for all we know, all kinds of stuff could be going on out there, but we're not out there.
George Van Tassel's nephew took me to the spot near Giant Rock where he had his first UFO encounter with Solgonda, I believe it was. And my God, if the rock where this ship came down is in crystal, it's all crystallized. And of course, down around in Alien Strongholds, we have a whole chapter which you contributed to on UFOs in the desert. People are having experiences and sightings down around Joshua Tree. They have for decades, not only in the desert but also in the in the mountains of Peru and Mount Shasta and all. But tell us a little bit about your interest in the Marian phenomena and what that includes. I mean, we think about, of course, the visions at Fatima that the three shepherd children had back in 1916, 1917, but it's a lot more involved than that. Why don't you give us a little rundown on the Mary and the UFOs and all?
Well, I'm fascinated by that because in a lot of these apparitions of Mary, like with Fatima, the children never said she was Mary. They just said she was the float. I'm not sure exactly what they called, but the floating lady, or just a lady that appeared. But because of the religious culture and the way they grew up and everything, everyone assumed it was Mary, and one thing led to another.
They were. It was a Catholic country that they.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So exactly. So. I wonder if these apparitions appear, and that's just how they present themselves, because of the religious culture, of the area. But there's a lot of, they appear as light, they appear as a feminine force, they have messages to convey. They of peace and love, and sometimes warnings. Not everyone will see the apparition as a figure like with Dana Howard, but they'll see a light or a light form or some kind of energy or plasma type apparition. People are emotionally moved, so obviously there's some communication. Something's going on there with some kind of energy. And it's just presenting itself in a certain way to us, depending on the context of where they're at, whether it's in the Catholic community or what have you.
Well, in Orbs too. We had a lady out here in Queens, very Catholic, a little bit over the top as far as I'm concerned, but people would take photographs of her, and there'd be orbs there. She didn't believe in you. She thought, I think, if somebody asked her one time about UFOs, she thought that they were demonic. But also she had, her big thing was the smell of roses, And I think on
Yeah,
several occasions they even saw roses float down from above, and nobody was throwing them or anything like that.
and that
But Tim,
happened
go
in
ahead.
Fatima too,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in other Marian apparitions, the smell of roses, and that this is what I find interesting too, is this crossover between one seemingly specific paranormal event and then crossing over to others, because the smell of roses will happen a lot with hauntings, for example. And I've had that experience where there was nothing religious about it, or there was no Marian apparition, but I would be in a haunted house, for example, and suddenly a very strong scent of roses would come. So again, I think these things, they might act independently on the surface, but I think they're also connected in some way.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, if Dana Howard had lived 100 years earlier and lived in another part of the world, how she may have interpreted her original experience.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, well, and the same thing with the Fatima children. There's a drawing of how their lady looked from their first experience, and the drawing looks nothing like what you would think of as the traditional Marian apparition.
Right.
This figure looks almost more like somebody you'd see in a movie from the 1960s.
There was a very famous rock guitarist by the name of Billy Squier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
There's one or two songs that they still play on the radio, but hasn't been performing for years and years. And one of the reasons that he hasn't performed, he told me this story one time, that he saw a Marian phenomena. It was a lady in white, but I believe that she was inside of some transparent craft or something that came down out of the sky. I would refer you to my Secret Prophecies of Fatima book, because it's been a long time since I did the interview, and it's been a long time since I checked my notes on the subject. But there are more people than we probably realize who have such visions. I guess you would call it a vision more than anything else. And of course, the other one that's very famous that the church is just getting around, they haven't called it a miracle yet, would be the one that's in Magigorica.
Yeah, Magigorica. I wrote something for UFO Digest about Mary as a trickster, because the church will not call it a miracle. Yeah, they have come out and denounced these sightings, saying how Mary wouldn't behave this way, that the words and the actions and the appearances are not what we would typically expect from Marian apparitions. And that got me to thinking, maybe this is a trickster figure. Maybe it's not Mary at all. And that kind of ticked some people off, and they let me know it. But anyway, I just that's where my mind went.
Well, good for you. Good for you, though, because I mean that's that you're possibly actually reaching something if you tick a few people off.
Yeah. Something about I can't remember the details, but kind of giving weird messages to people that were harmful, allegedly, and so I don't know. And then knowing the politics of the church and the politics of the region at the time, how much of that is all wrapped up together, either inviting or invoking this kind of trickster energy in, or this energy found it and said, "Hey, this is a good place," So I just think it's, even though these different paths we take, speculation may be weird. I think it's important to go there to just see what happens.
Yes.
So we don't get locked into assumptions.
We didn't even get to talk about the Bigfoot tonight, and we're closing in on the back here in the east, the 11 o'clock hour, and Reagan, we want to give you the opportunity to tell our listeners, both at KCOR and our many fans on our YouTube, Mr. UFO Secret Files, how they can get in touch with you and what your current projects are.
Well, I'm working on something called it's just about orbs and the difference. A lot of these orbs, I've had positive experiences with UFOs and I've had negative experiences. Mm-hmm. And to not put a judgment on that. So that's what I'm working on now. And people, if you just go, I run a lot of blogs.
Oh, you do, yes. Blogs.
So you could if you just do like Reagan Lee UFO or Reagan Lee Bigfoot, that would be probably the best way because I have so many blogs. Or
you've got the big orange blob, a blog.
Orange Orb, or I'm on Orange Orb, two words on WordPress is my blog. One of the blogs, and you can email me at orangeorb@mail.com, not Gmail, mail.com. So orangeorb@mail.com.
And Facebook, of course. Facebook too.
Oh yeah, Facebook for sure.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find her. If Tim and I were able to find her, you'll be able to find her. And don't forget to pick up those books. Alien Stronghold would be the latest one, and Mysteries of Death Valley also too. I believe she has some material in there, and that's got a lot of channeling from George Van Tassel. And good night, one and all. Good night, Peter. Good night, Helen. Good night, Tina. Good night, Tim, out there in Jasper, Indiana. And good night, Carol.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.